Well, good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to everybody on the call. Thank you so much for joining us. This is John Froelich with Bramasol, and I am excited to be here with my friends and colleagues from SAP to talk about the behind the scenes with SAP Revenue Accounting team. Today, I think you'll be all excited to hear about the latest innovations and what is going on, and talk a little bit about what was motivating some of the great updates that came out with SAP RAR in what we call OP 2020, or the latest release of S/4HANA. Just a quick reminder, as always, the webinar is being recorded, so you'll all have the opportunity to download it and share it with your friends. Feel free to ask questions throughout the session. There's a panel down here that you can do that. And then, of course, you can download previous webinars from our homepage. Reminder to contact us and check out the content. There's lots of different ways to engage with us. We have lots of different webinars available with this group, as well as some podcasts from Pete and others. So check us out on bramasol.com, go to Apple iTunes and iHeartRadio and check that out. So with that in mind, what I want to do is talk about our agenda. We'll do a welcome, or welcome everybody. This is going to be a slightly different format. You can see a lovely cup of coffee. It reminds me of the one at the top of the building in Waldorf. And we're going to do this more as a coffee discussion, or a coffee break or coffee session, and talk about the innovations in a little bit more of a relaxed and informal discussion. We'll introduce my distinguished group of panelists that I'm excited to have here, and then we're going to dive into 4 major topic areas. That'll be the S/4HANA revenue accounting, the power of S/4HANA. We've been talking for a while with Pete and others, the subscription economy. A lot of noise in the background. The subscription economy, so we'll dive into that. UI, UX, and then we'll have some analytics and dashboards discussions as well. And then we'll wrap up. As always, again, let me remind you, feel free to ask any questions. We'll address as many of them as we can. So with that, let me take a moment to introduce our speakers. Pete Graham. Welcome, Pete. Pete is the solution owner for SAP RAR. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, John. Good to be here.
Thank you for being here. Gerold Wellenhofer. Hello, Gerold. Welcome from Germany. Thank you for joining us. He's the SAP product owner for RAR.
Hello.
And Volkmar Zahn, S/4HANA Product Management Finance. Welcome, Volkmar.
Yeah, hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Yes. So, gentlemen, let's get started. So we picked these topics during our conversations, and we talked about the power of SAP revenue accounting on S/4HANA and what's driving this. And we talked about a number of things, and we'll touch on each of these subjects. But Pete, maybe you can share with the audience here what I like to call kind of the so what of RAR and S/4HANA. The fact that, obviously we hear a lot about the real-time data, but there's a lot here from the perspective of customers' needs being along this idea that you've shared, along the idea of the spectrum of complexity and density, and what does that mean to RAR, and why should anybody be interested in that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I mean, we have, when you look at our customer base, we have customers like Monotype, that are smaller, high-tech customers, to huge customers like Vodafone, right, telcos. And so we see this huge complexity of, not only the volume, but also the types of contracts, the types of scenarios, right, whether they're deeply nested or not, modification. So anyway, we have this huge complexity where we see this, huge spectrum that includes some less complex to huge complex, right? So the spectrum is quite interesting, and it's quite colorful from that standpoint, right? And so, we started this journey with ERP, and so along the way, we learned a lot of lessons. And I think one of the lessons we learned is we have to be more and more flexible for all these types of different situations. And so we tried to learn from those lessons and build that into the latest S/4HANA OP 2020 release, right? And so it has this optimized contract management, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But really, to me, that's part of the, let's call the secret sauce that really makes this product stand out more than anything else we've done, right? Because it then pulls in the Fiori and the embedded analytics, right? And gives you just so many more capabilities. But yes, we do see that as Spectrum, and we'll continue to talk about that because that's the way we view it, right? We see, you know, contract-based scenarios and event-based scenarios, and we see less complexity to more complex. We see lower volumes to higher volumes, and we see the volume on a per contract basis or event basis, as well as the depth or density, right, of the relationship with the customer. If you have a business to business contract, it might have thousands of performance obligations, right? So
yeah, that was the thing that I really got a lot out of when you guys present, is this idea of the complexity and density, right? It's not just about how many contracts, the volume of contracts, or the volume of business units, but that I love that idea, Pete, of the density. Can you take and how it's not just about how many contracts, but how many POBs and how many arrangements, or how many POBs are within those multiple arrangements, and how we see that spectrum. So that's great. A new term here that we see on here is automated revenue management. You know, we talk about revenue accounting in an ecosystem in a way, or revenue accounting, and we'll note, you know, this is not, we are focusing today, of course, on revenue accounting and reporting, RAR, but what are we talking about automated revenue management, Pete?
well, I mean, you'll see this term maybe more in the industry or more with the analyst, right? And so we're really talking about, again, this, you know, we talked a little bit about the spectrum, right? A complexity and volume. You can also start to overlay things at various fulfillment events, going from, you know, very simple cases all the way up through variable consideration, right? So you have straight line fulfillments, maybe percentage of completion. You might have contracts with multiple performance obligations. Now you know, as you keep going across the spectrum, you get more complex contract modifications. You get more complex cloud subscription, or into the subscriptions that we'll talk a little bit about, you know, the trend we're seeing with RAR and BRIM. And so really the spectrum looks like, you know, at first your contract looks a lot like the accounting view, to as you get to another side of the spectrum, you know, what's on your contract may not really reflect the accounting view, or there's differences because of maybe there's cash collection differences of the way the company is operating, right? So there's all kinds of differences we see in the spectrum, right? And so that's kind of the way we look at it when we're trying to figure out how do we keep making you know, our products more consumable, right? Simplify and automate revenue accounting recognition, right? We want to make that better and better. And so we're always looking at this spectrum with the motivation of how do we support the compliance activities of our customers for both the US GAAP and IFRS 15, right? ASC 606 and IFRS 15, as well as there are some end-to-end scenarios that come up over and over again, and we'd like to support those better. And we'd also like to make sure that, you know, we can fit into customers' existing landscapes. We both have on-premise and there's also cloud, right? So that's kind of some thoughts on that, John.
Great, thank you, Pete. So let's turn to this new feature, a new functionality that's core, and I think it's empowered and certainly made even more powerful by S/4HANA. Gerold, can you talk a little bit about what is optimized contract management? Describe, you know, what that's all about, why, and then why is it a big deal? And talk a little bit about the power of the inbound processing that goes with that.
Yeah, sure. Maybe you can imagine if you introduce optimized contract management, there are quite serious reasons behind that. And it was quite a learning journey since the release of RAR 1.0 back in 2014. And as Pete already mentioned, we have seen quite a lot of variations in terms of number of contracts, number of POBs within a contract, also the contract duration. Some like to manage a contract modification on a daily basis, and some others just like to have pure cost contracts for contract acquisitions. So quite a large spectrum. And to some extent, you can do this also with the classical contract management, but we need to manage those scenarios, which we have learned also to the extreme cases in a performant and user-friendly way. And so from all those changes, we have received a strong momentum to develop optimized contract management. And the second momentum to really develop something new is maybe something not so obvious, but it was also mentioned. SAP is a cloud company. Maybe you have heard that we now direct our strategy completely to cloud. And cloud comes also with new qualities, which also shine on our on-premise releases in terms of robustness, security, and performance. And you can do a lot with continuous improvements, and we also did that to some extent. And this is also within the classical contract management. But at some point of time, you need to do some redesign if you really want to become much better on this. And so those were the reasons to then come up with the optimized contract management. And one quite prominent example where we talk later is the day-based contract modifications, which is very, very important for the subscription economy. And the second reason is also that we really support those scenarios in a user-friendly way for small and big numbers, and small and big volumes is the UI. There is also a separate section on that where we talk about the user interface. And this is on top of our optimized contract management. Maybe coming back to the initial list of scenarios, yes, we do now support also day-based contract modifications, and also pure cost contracts and much more, and we talk about that during the talk.
Sure, thank you. Awesome. And I think you would agree that the ability to run RAR or revenue accounting in S/4HANA and the linkages and the power of HANA itself has really made this even more powerful and allowed RAR to support that much more activity, that much more volume, and really support more scenarios. So.
Right. I sort of mentioned some of those scenarios, and I just can also reiterate the fact that we introduced now optimized contract management. Sort of also means that in terms of robustness and also performance, we hit a new level. And this is also the new starting point for many new other improvements and innovations, where some will make it also to the classical contract management, but we sort of will have the optimized contract management sort of as a first starting point.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So, Pete, you hinted at the idea of the subscription economy, and of course, we all believe, and Gerold very rightly said, SAP is moving to the cloud. And what we're finding, it's hard to believe it's been 6 years now, but certainly over the past 2-3 years, and now with the new, the challenges we face in today's economy, we're finding more and more companies moving to a form of this subscription economy. It's a solution-based economy, an outcome-based economy, and the numbers tell the story. Gartner says that 75% of B2C companies will offer subscription services, and we see that happening already with companies like Birchbox and others who offer clothes, or you can get Chewies for food, for your pet food, lots of others. Certainly the compound annual growth rate over the past 7 years has been impressive, 18% in this space, and we know that the margins are higher, and people, we anticipate, will be spending a lot on subscriptions. So we've been talking a lot about this idea of subscription economy. We're also seeing, as we move to this space, a lot of different areas. And maybe Volkmar, you can talk a little bit about how the optimized contract management impacts this, and some of the features together with Gerold. I mean, you guys can share some insights. But we see more and more companies, again, going to a SaaS model. We see more and more companies actually doing consumption-based models where they sell a piece of equipment in the kind of the old razor blade model, where you sell subscriptions, where you're selling a product for a low price, yet your call-off orders, or you're doing things around these subscriptions for the consumables. And that forces you to have to be a little more agile. And customers have been asking for that. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, Gerold mentioned already the day-based calculations, but maybe it's worth to just take a step back on that matter. So already in the classic contract management, as part of the revenue accounting add-on, we were able to support contract modifications, but usually we tailored this towards the industries which were using revenue accounting, and a period-based reflection of these contract changes was always sufficient. Yeah, most customers told us, well, it's all right. Yeah. When we moved to S4 HANA, however, we took the chance, and this is what is now referred to as this optimized contract management, to rethink this. And I think this fits very much into the subscription needs. When you look at the subscription business, you will see that this also goes along with a lot of more frequent changes. And as a result, also changes which may happen in the middle of a month. And as a result, especially from those organizations and corporations that were dealing with subscriptions, we had the requirement, can you bring this in not only based on a period, but can you reflect this based on the day of the change of a contract? And also do this in the manner IFRS 15 basically requires that. So that was a starting point when we moved into S4HANA, to also rethink how can we improve this contract management we had at hand. Of course, that needed to go along with what customers were able to use before. So the classic contract management capabilities, the tables, the data structures, the data model behind, of course, had to stay in a way that, yeah, you as a customer, or as a partner as well, John, right, were able to continue to use it as you knew it before. Another topic which goes along with these more frequent changes is that also in the context of subscriptions, you may have to deal with renewals more frequently, or the other way around, what happens if a contract is cancelled. And from the telco industry, which is also very much subscription based, you could argue, we had this term early termination. So when you have maybe a bundle business and you need to stop a certain scenario because the customer doesn't want to continue with the contract, what do you do then with the contract asset? Where do you write this off? And as a result, we brought in specific scenarios around early terminations. So that's just two flavors where we took the chance. Moving to S4HANA was not only just copying a package, a software package into a new area, but also to remodel, to modernize on a number of items. Yeah, just picking on the two items.
Absolutely, and I know that we find, and here's a list of many of the ones that are in here, and thank you, Volkmar. You know, and I think you brought up an interesting point, because I don't think day-based calculations should be fairly easy. You know, why can't you, what's let's look at that, or the terminations. And of course, we used to look at it from the perspective of variable consideration and asking companies to, how often do you see terminations and what is your cancellation rates? And you would create some variable consideration. But you mentioned something I don't think people think about, which is the impact of contract assets and liabilities. And so the ability to look at these and integrate that and look at that impact is certainly very powerful. So
Yeah,
I think,
and John, maybe just on that point, I think that's really a good point that you highlight that. So for us, when designing revenue accounting, was always important not only to look at the, let's say, the profit and loss and the revenue accounts and maybe the cost, but also to reflect that in the balance sheet model. So a lot of the work and consideration actually went into how do you post contract asset, contract liability, unbilled, and also receivables, right? That was a major part of the revenue accounting development and still is. And while the standard, at least IFRS 15, sounds pretty clear on what needs to be done, we see many different flavors. And if you look at the customizing, the configuration we have available, you see also that over time, many new options were evolving, and we still see a lot of discussions with customers on that matter. So I just wanted to highlight a little bit what you brought up, right?
No, and of course that's perfect. And as I think of the conversations that we've had and I've had with Pete around issues like this, there are two things that jump out at me when you say that. One is the integration, the fact that RAR sits in the core of SAP S/4HANA. It's not an add-on. It's not a separate thing. It's integrated, and it's because of that integration that it allows you to do what you can do, update the contract assets and liabilities and do all of the postings that would be required versus a standalone solution that might not be able to do that. And then, further to, Pete, and maybe we'll segue to you in a way, you can touch on the close. You and I have talked many times about how, and I know this is a little off script a little bit, but how RAR is about automation and simplification, not just of your revenue accounting, but the accounting processes. And maybe before we talk about the BRIM integration piece, you can comment on the close and how the fact that you can have this integrated solution actually will accelerate close.
Yeah, I mean, even though many people may think revenue accounting reporting was about IFRS 15 or ASC 606, we still have customers, even some customers that have rolled out on ASC 606 and IFRS 15 that, still are having trouble with closing their books because of the revenue streams are just not automated the way they manage them. So, we still have that base case where customers come in, they implement RAR, and they're now closing their books on day 0, 1, or 2, depending on some other issues. But they're having a very good close, right? They're having a very smooth close with that respect, and so that still is a big value prop. And we're seeing that also starting to impact some of the other discussions you've had with the day-based and these real-time business models, right? As subscriptions and consumptions based on subscriptions, right? People buy so much cloud computing power or, conference room time minutes, right? And they consume them, right? They want to recognize that revenue, right, on the other side. And so these real-time things are becoming more important, and that also potentially can impact your close if you're not managing those items in real time. They kind of stack up at the end of the month, and now you've got to manage them in bulk, and they could delay your process.
Exactly, or down to the detail level. We know lots of people who may have to use spreadsheets to allocate properly, and now the power of optimized contract management in HANA allows you to do that detailed allocation. So sure.
Yep.
Talk about, you and I have seen a couple of scenarios over the past year or so where we're seeing more and more customers integrating, because of subscription economy, the need for agile billing scenarios, invoicing, CPQ into the revenue accounting, and we're seeing more and more interaction of RAR with and revenue accounting in general with solution selling / subscription billing, et cetera. Maybe you can comment on what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I mean, this is a trend, as we had a session on this earlier in the year, and this is a trend we saw last year, but actually, the first customer we worked on this was actually now almost 5 years ago, right? So this is something that has been building slowly but consistently, and kind of the customer requirement is, right, they want to be responsive to the market, and so they are on the marketing side looking at different marketing programs or bundles and analysis, and they're very quickly then wanting to determine how those could impact revenue. And so if there's integration between these two systems, and there are, Brim and RAR do have integration, then these customers can do some of that analysis and then know not only what an estimate of the revenue is, but they can know what the real revenue recognition is. So it really starts in this planning phase or market analysis phase. And then once the marketing folks have determined what makes sense and they execute that plan, then the operational side from an accounting perspective can also be automated and simplified, right? And that's really where the advantages are, right? So you get the flexibility, you get the automation, and you get the feedback, right? Because this is what everybody wants to be able to see. And we'll talk about that shortly, right? With the embedded analytics, how that feedback can be even more more insightful, right? So.
Exactly. Perfect.
Yeah, and then maybe, John, a few words on that. You probably remember we had a few discussions on the term subscription economy, and I was not too fond on that term, right? What we see in the market is certainly a trend towards subscriptions. More customers across all industries are looking at subscription models. Yeah, automotive, where you sell the car plus a digital connect service, or maybe you have toothpaste, toothbrushes as a subscription, right? But what I see even more as a trend is that companies tend to go into really this solution selling. So coming from a very product-centric approach, yeah, we sell whatever, right, on the device, to more selling services, selling a whole solution bundle, yes, selling the installation together with a service contract, with a warranty, plus maybe offering, instead of buying the machine, that the machine is leased, just as an example. And this is why I'm honestly not so fond really on this term subscription economy, although probably goes in the same direction, but more into the digital transformations we see with our customers going into a solution business, selling complete packages, adding more values to the customers, to the end customer, right?
I agree, and I as you know, I struggle with coming up with a better term than subscription, solution, outcome-based economy. It all, you hit the nail on the head, Volkmar. I mean, we're seeing more and more scenarios with our customers that are, we'll call it outcome-based, where maybe it's not a true subscription. It's, I'm buying volumes of material, or I'm buying a specific outcome, printed pages or volumes of computing power, and we're seeing it more and more with different industries. I think that's the interesting thing for me. And then it has implications back to how you're doing revenue accounting, because I think leasing, you hit an interesting one. I'd be interested. The leasing aspects, we're seeing a lot more companies that are doing leasing or rentals, and that has huge implications to how you account for that. And as we've been talking with customers who are doing both lessee and lessor accounting, in the lessor accounting space, we're seeing customers who all of a sudden are waking up to the rev rec implications of what they're doing, and looking for a tool that's as powerful as RAR for things, like early terminations, right? Usually if you early terminate a lease, there's a penalty for that. Well, how do you deal with that? And what happens when you have these assets on the books, whether it's a finance or an operating lease? Bringing these products together is simply a very powerful way to enable your business, right?
Yeah, and if I may comment this, this is a very innovative and interesting challenge, yeah, also for all companies to understand in which standard they really are with the business. And so they really need to understand whether they have an asset which they provide with the customer for the right of use. And in this case, they probably would end up in the lease standard, or whether they have a pure service, and then they would use revenue accounting and reporting. And
right.
so far, we have seen more evidence that sort of they fall either in the one or the other class. And so revenue accounting and reporting really is also sort of supporting this kind of lease type of business scenarios.
Yeah, no, Gerold, you're absolutely right. What we're also seeing is sort of a chicken or an egg. And when I say that, it's customers who are looking saying, well, I know I have a leasing challenge under 842, not a lot of implications to lessor accounting, but how I value and manage that asset is driven by depending on how they do their scenarios, is driven by the allocation effect that happens out of revenue accounting. And but lease account, there's kind of a back and forth. And the nice thing, of course, the powerful thing is with SAP, you have the ability to have that all in one place. You're not trying to manage 3 or 4 different solutions in different places and have reconciliation problems. It's a nice, easy way to do that, right? And particularly with S4. So. Yeah, I mean, this is an exciting area, and I think I see more and more of the growth, and I know you all are really focused in this space, and I promise Volkmar for the next one, we'll come up with a better term than subscription, though. We will do that.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So, Gerold, you hinted at the UI UX, and it's when you mentioned, since Pete said, and we've all talked about, it's hard to believe that it's been since 2014. We've been talking about RAR and on this journey now together for, gosh, 6 years plus now, and the evolution of what Volkmar, Gerold, and the SAP team has done to really on the UI UX and the user experience has been fantastic. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what did you hear from customers and how did that influence the implementation of these ideas around Fiori tiles and transactions? Maybe Volkmar, you can touch on that drive, and then maybe Gerold, talk a little bit about how that helps push data and access to data to the fingertips, if you will.
Yeah, that's a good point, and certainly also a major development enhancement we've done with when moving to S4HANA, right? So again, let's take a step back. Revenue accounting used to be an add-on on the SEC stack, could be also deployed on top of S4HANA, but we needed to develop it in a way where it can be used also for ECC customers where Fiori or the latest UI technologies are simply not available. So we chose back then, I would say, still modern UI with WebDim Pro, and also with the SAP transactions with SAP GUI, but still losing out a little bit on all the innovations which happened around us. And as a development team, you could really see that sometimes it's sad if all the other teams are developing the latest Fioris and using other technologies to improve usability of the solution. When we moved to S4HANA, starting with the 1809 release, we also, again, took that as a chance to renew all the UIs. And first of all, that was a technology change, moving to the Fiori tiles and Fiori UIs, but also using that opportunity to tidy up a little bit on the screens. And maybe just a few little examples. So in the WebDim Pro screens, usually you had to navigate, it was a little bit hidden to the contract asset and contract liability being calculated. And what we learned is, well, customer would like to see this straight ahead when looking at the revenue contract. And that's also what we then enabled. Of course, with Fiori, new technology, and you need to also look at how the technology supports the business scenarios. We're still learning with that, so you will see additions to the scenario. So, for instance, how we support the monitoring of contracts and bring in together a few KPIs. We also used this not only to just refurbish the known screens like the revenue contract, the performance obligation, the revenue schedule, for instance, but also to provide additional reports and verification UIs. And what you see here to the right-hand side, and thanks for putting this so nicely together, you see some of the tiles which we offer, and there we have a revenue explanation. We added the allocated amount explanation, a document flow to show where does the data come in and from where do the orders originate, where does the fulfillment come from. So all of that was added as additional features to help really understand the details. And I think also adding a lot of additional value. We also provided them a little accounting overview where you see how the recognized revenue is developing, what your top performance obligations are, and what you will see over the next releases is further investment into that technology, making it easier to use revenue accounting, because I think we all agree that the IFRS 15 standard did not really make it easier to understand all the numbers given the allocations we have.
Yeah, well, and of course it's more of a principles versus a formulaic approach, which is what it was in the previous go around. It's more of a principles based, and it allows for that flexibility, right? And there's a lot of practical experience. What I really loved in here is, after 6 years of watching demos, over the past year or year and a half, watching our team, Sarah Thompson in particular, doing the demos, and I love the concept, and maybe you can comment for a minute, Volkmar, about this concept of the home screen and how the home screen is tailored to, and you can even tailor it yourself, but it's tailored to a role or a function. Because it used to be you would go in, you'd WebDim Pro, you'd put in a T code, or you'd put in some function at the top, and you'd type it in, and then you get the standard SAP My Favorites menu on the left, and everybody liked that. But now it's, let me show you and go back to, here's the revenue accountant's role, here's the manager's role, here's the IT person's role. I'm assuming a lot of thought went into that process.
Oh, absolutely. So when you start with a role definition, usually you try to think about the user and the different roles which may use your transactions. Actually, the identity and access management, so the authorizations behind that, take a lot of time. It sounds pretty easy. You define a new role, you define the transactions, but usually it's a full-time work for a developer to think about all the catalogs that go into it and all the authorizations that need to be tailored towards it. And yes, the idea is in the end to have a role-based access just with those transactions, with those views which are relevant to your daily work as a user. And of course, yes, it's flexible. You can add additional transactions if you want to, but indeed, the idea is to really have a focused work area just for the purpose of your activities.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Gerold, maybe you can talk, and I don't have it on this screen. I know Sarah has ones, and in the future we'll show those as we do some more videos. But not only does the Fiori screen, the Fiori tiles allow you to create transactions, and you can click on them and go to transactions easily, but it brings data to your fingertips. It brings data to the front, such as here's your deferred revenue. If you were to do a tile that talked about the number of items that were exception based, maybe you can just talk for a moment or two about how we can push data to the user using these tiles, for example.
Yeah, sure. I mean, here we can leverage the full strength of an integrated system. And I always sort of remember your eyes lightening when you can navigate from a classical process dry either to the sender contract or to the revenue accounting contract. There is an example how easy you can navigate through the different objects here. Also to the single account assignments, as also revenue accounting assures that the sender information is not changed, with the exception, of course, to integrated systems without knowledge of proper account assignments. And here we do offer also a way to determine those account assignments. But I mean, it's also a kind of not only introducing a new UI technology with Fiori, but we also sort of redesigned the way the data is reflected on the UI. So if you think about the contract management, we now right away include the open revenue or the open costs, as we have seen that customers are interested in that information. In the conflict list, that was also redesigned. You see unsafe changes, the pending days, the number of conflicting days. And so each of those UIs, which might have the same name even in the classical contract management or the RAR part, you have a completely redesigned user interface, bringing the data properly to the user. And we touched already on the changes, right? And you might remember that the changes seem to be not so challenging from what you hear from other applications, but the new IFRS or IAC standard, it really includes some tricky parts. If you have a change, you need to understand exactly what has changed, why it has changed, and how it was changed. Maybe you remember that we have different variations in the standard with a prospective or a retrospective or a mixed change. And for the prospective change, you basically create a new contract based on the existing contract, and you need to understand the remaining price, the remaining standalone selling price that you can do the allocation. And we really sort of tried hard to make this kind of calculations very understandable with the new Fiori tiles, that you can understand it in an easy way. Also, the change history has been improved, and yeah, coming back to data to your fingertips, you also like to know the document flow for your single performance applications. And so we now have reflected in the document flow the operational documents, so either a sales order, a provider contract, or also the fulfillment documents like a goods issue, a proof of delivery, customer invoice, the billing documents, and also the original documents for cost corrections. or also then the journal entries created by revenue accounting.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great point, Gerold. And also when I look at these, I think of everybody's favorite process, which is audits, and your annual or your ability to do your 10Ks, 10Qs. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But, your auditor comes in and says, well, show me, how exactly did you go about allocating this revenue? What's your process? And it used to be, here's 15 different spreadsheets, and let's go into the SAP transactions. And it's right there. Here's my allocated amount explanations. Well, how did these here's your document flow. Here's the change histories. Here's how we're managing it. I think it will save time, effort, and create much more clarity on the audit process as well. So with that, let's focus in, we talk about at the end of the day, a number of different things. And one of the big concepts we have out there is this concept of a comply, optimize, and transform. And the idea is to allow you to create a foundation. You've complied, you've done the things you have to do to meet GAAP, whether it's an IFRS or it's a GAAP or whatever. Optimization is all about simplification, automation, using the data to make decisions about processes, and then as Pete hinted at, the transformation. Pete, why don't you talk a little bit about the analytics and dashboards, because it's all about these embedded analytics at the end of the day, and why so much attention to this? This seems to be something that customers are really clamoring for and asking for, and maybe then Volkmar and Gerold, you can talk about what we've done in this space. Pete?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't, for some reason the screen was not responding. I could not get the mute button unmuted. But anyway, I think one of the things that we have in the product is SAP revenue accounting and reporting. We've always wanted to work on the reporting part, and due to a variety of reasons, that reporting work has probably taken longer than we thought, right, or longer than we wanted to. But now with the embedded analytics, a lot of this reporting capability is here and then some, right? It's a much better capability than we first envisioned, right, when the product was initially being worked on, prior to 2015. And that's some of the feedback we're hearing from customers, right? The ability to go in and really, the new standard is very granular, right? You have all these performance obligations by installment. It's very granular. The system's producing tons of data, but how do you sift through that data and get the data that you want? And things like the revenue schedule are nice, right? I think that's a great screen, great feature of the product. But now you can really filter it or really have it accessible more in real time with these pivot table like embedded analytics capabilities. So to me, that's a huge benefit, right? And we're seeing this from customers, right? Customers are telling us, the more they can get data out of the system and the easier they can do it, the more insights they get out, right? And that's where they get tremendous value and benefits.
Absolutely. Gerold, Volkmar, any comments on, talk a little bit about what's been done. How did you do it? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the power of the CDS views and what that means to the customers can do now.
Yeah, right. As Pete outlined, we used to have technologies like data extractors, and we only had WebDimpro sample reports at the beginning. And again, here moving to S4HANA was really giving us a chance to renew that, aligned with how you would do it in S4HANA. So we provide core data services, CDS views you refer to, which is a easier, better performing access to the S4HANA database. And we built this out now with the 2020 release for the most essential and relevant disclosure requirements we've seen. So we were already able to support the disaggregation of revenue based on the 1909 release. based on the new technology, but added now contract balances, contract balance movements. We added the remaining PUB amounts, total amount, as well as time bands, and also provide a revenue catch-up report. So all of that is utilizing S/4HANA capabilities. The consumption is either based on Web2Impro Multigrid as a standard option within S/4HANA, or as an alternative, you could also use the Design Studio if you want to be a little bit more flexible in adding additional attributes or changing the layout. Actually, that's what you see here on the screen, the contract balance view based on the Design Studio, where within the navigation panel we can just add additional attributes and tailor the report according to the needs we have. And that's a great starting point. Yeah, so we certainly have advanced. Pete mentioned that already. The revenue accounting and reporting now deserves also the name reporting because of all the added capabilities. And yeah, we believe that there's certainly also some room for additional flavors. Innovation capabilities comes up as a topic, but this is where we are very much based on customer feedback, and also would be interested in what is required in addition.
Sure, sure. And the other thing I love is the right-hand graph, Volkmar and Gerold, which is the visualization. You know, it's data is great, and of course the fact that you can manipulate it and work with it and change it to ask the what-if questions or the slice and dice questions. But sometimes a picture tells 1,000 words, and I love what you've done, you know, with some of these graphs also to allow customers to really be able to visualize the impacts. So.
Yeah, we get a lot of great feedback on this accounting overview. It's a good entry point, but also I would say a starting point for further discussion. So that's why I said, well, we would be very interested to get some feedback on how do you want to build this out in terms of KPIs? What do you need to see? What's really relevant to drive your business? And a lot of that is, of course, based on revenue figures. We all know that. But to bring this into a dashboard would be a next major step. As you know, SAP is heavily extending on analytics capabilities. So SAP Analytics Cloud is a big topic. We do not have content for that yet, which is more due to the fact that we're still trying to do first the basics around the disclosures, but then of course if you think about what would be possible using dashboards and visualization capabilities, that's still quite a lot of opportunities out there, right?
Yeah, and to do a shameless commercial, I'll tell you on Thursday we're going to show some dashboards linked as a result of linking together the digital boardroom and the dashboards from SAP together with some dashboards that we've been working with you guys on. So that'd be interesting for you guys for folks to take a look at. We'll record it, so I'll share that with you, with everybody. Gerold, any thoughts from you, and then we'll start to wrap up on this one?
I myself like this reporting. So maybe on this right-hand side view, you see on the available fields, and you can just add it to either the columns or to the rows, and then you can get a drill down for the field. Yeah, like if you like to have it detailed out by any account assignment, like a cost center or profit center, you just can add it to the report. And the power of the CDS views is really in a way that if you're not happy with an existing report, you could also build easily a report on those CDS views with the techniques you see here. And I think that's really a big step which we have done here.
Yeah, well, I think the big step, and then we'll move, is, and we talked about it previously on the previous slide, which is UI UX. And we always talk about the UI, the user interface, but not as much with the user experience. And I think what you've done here with the new platform, right? We like to talk about it as a platform with the new revenue accounting is made it more user friendly. I think that's a huge change that I've seen. And think about this perspective when you would have to call somebody up and say, oh, I need a new report that pulls all of these different fields versus the one I had, and could you aggregate it in this different way? You've put that in the hands of the user. You've allowed the user to take on the ability to ask and analyze. We call that, we like to call it insight to action, right? And that's what I think has been now so powerful in this evolution, for sure. So with that in mind, I'm just going to hold this slide here. Maybe we'll take a moment and I'll ask everybody to kind of we have a couple of minutes left. We'll go Gerold, Volkmar, and Pete. Maybe you can take 1 minute to wrap up and say, what's the, my favorite phrase, which is, what's the big so what? Of all of this we've heard about, what's the big implication from your perspective, and why is this such a big deal? And Gerold, why don't you start, and then Volkmar and Pete.
Okay, sure. So maybe you have heard me sort of quite enthusiastic talking about the new optimized contract management, that this is really a result of a longer learning process and journey which we took, and which is now supporting all different scenarios, starting from simple to complex. And which is scaling very nicely. It will be the basis for our future innovation. Those will come first on that, optimized contract management. And here you also get great analytics and the beautiful Fury UI, which you have also seen shortly here. And it covers also new scenarios. I like especially to highlight the day-based scenarios and also the cost-only contracts. And yeah, I just can reiterate, it's a powerful platform for revenue and cost recognition.
Absolutely, thank you. Volkmar, what should a customer, why should somebody walk away with excitement for the new RAR?
Right, so what we see in the market is there's a big shift in how business operate. Digital transformation, maybe one term, you can call it subscription economy, solution business. And for all of these, let's say, transformations, RefReg will play a major role. And this is also how we evolve the portfolio for automated revenue management. You heard Pete talking about this. So we need to be able to address the market needs for big customers, for small customers, high volume, high value scenarios, and for all of what Pete and Gerold already mentioned, the portfolio around revenue management will be further enhanced and will also be taken to market.
Great, thank you, Volkmar. Pete, any last thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I really think it's a combination. I mean, you take the S/4HANA, right, capabilities in memory with optimized contract management, Fury UI, embedded analytics, right? You have a very powerful modern revenue accounting and reporting system, right? So to me, that's the big aha. So
I agree. And I think it's the evolution and just an amazing place, and the power. The more we talk to customers and the more that you all bring to the table in terms of S4. And of course, I'm extremely excited about the power that RAR combined and with the true innovations in S/4HANA around things like the Universal Journal and et cetera, I think are more to come with that. So with that in mind, I just want to thank all three of you. I'm just going to go through finish up the slide here, but thank all of you for joining. Pete, Gerold, and Volkmar, as always, it's been a pleasure talking with all of you. I think it's been really insightful in terms of the direction and what drove the innovations. And we look forward to more innovations and more success as a team. So thank you very much. And everybody, reminder that you can, this will be available in about 24 to 48 hours. You can download and share with everyone. So with that, I thank everybody, and I wish you a great, successful, and stay safe, and have a great day.